Welcome back to Hopeful Horizon, where we share stories that inspire, challenge, and keep you on the edge of your seat. Today's story takes us on a family vacation turned nightmare, where a simple getaway is shattered by racial profiling and wrongful arrest. What the police officers don't realize, however, is that the father of this family is a high-ranking FBI agent, armed not just with a badge, but with a plan for justice. What unfolds next will expose corruption, ignite a fierce battle for accountability, and leave you questioning who's really in control. Prepare yourself for a gripping journey filled with unexpected twists, intense confrontations, and a satisfying moment of comeuppance that will make you cheer. If you enjoy stories about resilience, justice, and powerful turning points, make sure to comment below. Don't forget to subscribe and tap the bell icon so you never miss another unforgettable story from Hopeful Horizon. And let us know where you're listening from. We love hearing from our community. The Simmons family had been planning this trip for months, an escape from the pressures of their demanding lives. Darren Simmons, a 38-year-old father of two, had decided it was time for a proper family vacation. As a special agent for the FBI, Darren rarely got time off, so he made sure this trip would be memorable. His wife, Olivia, a lawyer, had been just as eager, hoping for a peaceful break with their two children, Miles, 12, and Jasmine, 8. They had chosen a picturesque coastal town, known for its white sandy beaches and vibrant boardwalks. After checking into a beautiful beachfront resort, they headed out for a day of sightseeing. The children were full of excitement as they begged to ride the Ferris wheel. Darren, with a warm smile, promised, "Later, okay? First, let's grab some lunch." The Simmons family strolled along the busy boardwalk, blending into the crowds. Olivia marveled at the ocean breeze as she held Jasmine's hand, while Darren and Miles lagged a few steps behind, talking about the latest baseball stats. It seemed like the perfect day until they noticed two police officers watching them from across the boardwalk. Darren was no stranger to the stares. He had grown used to how some people looked at him and his family, a black family dressed in designer clothes, staying at an expensive resort. But he tried to shrug it off. "Come on, kids," he said softly. "Let's grab a table over here." As they took a seat at an outdoor restaurant, Darren sensed the two officers inching closer. His FBI training kicked in. He knew trouble was brewing. The officers, one older with a thick mustache and the other younger with nervous eyes, approached the table. "Can we help you, officers?" Darren asked, keeping his tone neutral. The older cop scowled. "We got a report about some suspicious activity. A family matching your description was seen acting strangely." "Mind stepping aside for a word?" Darren's jaw tightened. "We're on vacation. What kind of suspicious activity?" "You match the description," the younger officer said, shifting uneasily. Olivia interjected calmly. "Is there a reason you're profiling us in front of our children?" Things escalated quickly. One officer reached for his cuffs. "Let's not make this harder than it needs to be." Before Darren could react, both officers yanked him away from the table. Olivia screamed, holding on to her children. Miles shouted, "Don't hurt my dad!" Within minutes, more police cars arrived. The Simmons family was surrounded. Onlookers stopped and stared, some recording with their phones. Darren looked into Olivia's eyes. This was going to get ugly. The officers forced Darren against a patrol car. "You have the right to remain silent," one officer barked, slapping the cuffs onto his wrists. Darren felt the cold steel bite into his skin, but he kept his composure. Jasmine was sobbing uncontrollably, clinging to Olivia's leg. Olivia's heart pounded in her chest. She tried to keep her voice steady as she addressed the officers. "What are the charges?" "Suspicion of theft and public disturbance," the older officer said dismissively. The absurdity of the situation hit Olivia like a slap to the face. "Public disturbance? Are you kidding me?" she hissed. The crowd murmured around them, but the officers didn't seem to care. Darren stood silently, calculating his next move. He knew if he revealed his FBI badge now, things could escalate even further. His instincts told him to wait. As Olivia tried to shield her children, another officer grabbed her arm. "You're coming too." "You can't just arrest us without reason," Olivia protested, but it was useless. They handcuffed her as well, dragging her toward the police car. Jasmine and Miles cried out, "Mom! Dad!" The sight of their parents being treated like criminals was too much for the children to bear. The officers forced Darren and Olivia into separate patrol cars. The children were left standing on the sidewalk, stunned and terrified. A female officer eventually arrived and took them to the station in a different vehicle. Through the rear window of the patrol car, Darren watched as his family was scattered. His fists clenched, his pulse quickened, but he kept his mind sharp. He knew what was coming next, and he was ready. The hum of fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Darren sat in the cold holding cell, hands resting on his lap. He stared at the scuffed concrete walls, breathing slowly to maintain control. Around him, the sounds of jail life echoed, metal doors slamming, officers chatting, and the distant hum of a vending machine outside the cells. Darren had been in places like this before, but never on the wrong side of the bars. On the other side of the station, Olivia fumed in her cell, pacing like a caged lion. Every few steps, she would glance out through the bars, hoping for a glimpse of their children. "Where are my kids?" she shouted toward the officers stationed at the desk. "What did you do with them?" "Ma'am, calm down," one officer muttered without looking up from his paperwork. "Calm down?" Olivia hissed, gripping the bars tightly. "My husband and I were arrested in front of our children. For nothing. I'm a lawyer, and I promise you'll regret this." Darren, sitting in his own cell down the hall, heard Olivia's voice carrying through the station. A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. He admired her fire. She was fearless, sharp, and relentless, the same qualities that had drawn him to her years ago. An officer in the corner, the younger one from the arrest, shuffled nervously. He hadn't expected things to spiral so quickly. "We're just following protocol," he mumbled toward Olivia. "Protocol?" Olivia snapped. "You didn't read us our rights. You had no grounds for arrest. What kind of operation are you running here?" The officer shifted, uncomfortable with the weight of her glare. Darren knew the young cop was in over his head. He was waiting, timing everything carefully, watching for his moment to flip the situation on its head. A female officer escorted Miles and Jasmine into a back room nearby, separating them from their parents. Darren's heart tightened. From his cell, he could hear his daughter sobbing uncontrollably. "Where are Mommy and Daddy?" Jasmine's small voice broke through the walls. Darren clenched his fists, struggling to stay calm. He leaned forward on the bench, whispering to himself, "Just wait, Simmons, just wait." 2 hours passed in tense silence. Olivia had stopped pacing by now, sitting on the bench in her cell, her eyes burning with frustration. Darren remained eerily calm, watching the officers through the bars. He could tell they were growing increasingly nervous as time dragged on. Finally, the older officer returned to Darren's cell, holding a tablet. He tapped the screen a few times, his brow furrowing as he read Darren's information. The change in the officer's demeanor was immediate. His face turned pale and his jaw tightened. The officer glanced at Darren, then back at the tablet, disbelief creeping across his features. "Simmons, Darren Simmons," he muttered. Darren stood slowly, stretching his shoulders. "That's right," he said, pulling out his hidden badge from under his shirt. The gold emblem gleamed under the harsh lights. The officer's eyes widened in horror. You're FBI?" "Special Agent Simmons," Darren corrected, his tone razor-sharp. "And you've just made the biggest mistake of your career." The station went silent as every officer nearby turned to stare. The younger cop from earlier practically froze, his face drained of color. The police captain stormed into the room, his expression thunderous. "What the hell is going on here?" Darren locked eyes with the captain, holding up his badge for all to see. "I think you and your officers owe my family an explanation and an apology." The captain's expression shifted from confusion to sheer panic. He knew the gravity of the situation. "Agent Simmons, I had no idea. You should have checked before cuffing us in front of our kids," Olivia said, stepping forward as they unlocked her cell. "But now, you've got a problem." The Simmons family sat across from the police captain in the station's conference room, their children finally reunited with them. Olivia held Jasmine close while Miles leaned against his father's side, still shaken by the ordeal. The captain fumbled through an apology, but his words sounded hollow. "We deeply regret what happened today. This was a misunderstanding." A misunderstanding? Olivia shot back, her voice laced with sarcasm. You mean blatant racial profiling. Let's call it what it is. Darren leaned forward, fixing the captain with an unwavering stare. I've dealt with men like you before, Captain. You think you're above accountability until you run into someone like me. The captain swallowed nervously. Agent Simmons, I assure you, will conduct a full internal investigation. Oh, you'll do more than that, Olivia said coldly. I'm filing a formal complaint with the Department of Justice. And trust me, this story won't stay quiet. The captain nodded stiffly, knowing there was no escaping the storm that was about to hit. Darren stood, gathering his things. We'll be watching, he warned. The Simmons family left the station, their heads held high, but the officers who had wronged them wouldn't get off so easily. A week after the incident, Darren received a call from an old friend in the FBI's Internal Affairs Division. The agent's voice was filled with excitement. You're not going to believe this, Simmons. That police department, they've been under investigation for months. We just needed one more incident to break the case open, and your arrest was it. Darren smirked, a sense of satisfaction settling over him. So, what happens now? Now? The agent replied. Now we bring them down. The officers involved in your arrest are facing federal charges, corruption, misconduct, racial profiling, the works, and your case is the nail in the coffin. Darren leaned back in his chair, a grin spreading across his face. Justice had come full circle. The very men who had tried to humiliate him were now the ones facing disgrace. Months later, the Simmons family stood on a different beach, far from the town where their nightmare had unfolded. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting a warm orange glow over the water. Darren wrapped an arm around Olivia's shoulders as they watched Miles and Jasmine play in the surf. For the first time in a long while, peace settled over them. We made it through, Olivia whispered, leaning into her husband. Darren smiled, kissing the top of her head. Yeah, and we're stronger because of it. Their story had sparked a nationwide conversation about racial profiling and police misconduct. Laws were being reviewed, departments restructured, and those officers who had arrested them were now facing the full weight of the justice system. But for Darren and Olivia, the real victory was here, on this beach, with their children by their side. They had come through the storm together, and nothing could break them now. The Simmons family knew that life would always throw challenges their way, but no matter what came next, they would face it as they always had, together, unshaken and unbroken. Thank you for joining us on this gripping journey of resilience, justice, and redemption. This story reminds us that even in the face of prejudice and abuse, truth and accountability will always find a way to rise. The father's fight wasn't just for his family. It was a stand against a system that too often targets the innocent. It's a powerful reminder that we must always stand firm, speak up, and demand change, no matter the opposition. If this story moved you, leave a comment and share your thoughts. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and tap the bell so you'll never miss another captivating story from Hopeful Horizon. We'll be back soon with more tales that inspire, challenge, and leave you thinking long after they end. Thank you for being part of our community. Until next time, stay hopeful, stay vigilant, and never stop fighting for justice.